Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy Pride. We are very excited in the NOAA Central Library today to be hosting today's panel with the NOAA Pride ERG.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're very excited to bring together this panel of esteemed leaders. I'm going to kick off us today with a quick introduction into NOAA Pride, the NOAA Employee Resource Group focused on the needs of the NOAA community of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, and other identities. NOAA Pride is a resource for managers and staff in resolving issues affecting the LGBTQI+ employees. We promote the employment, advancement, and retention of persons regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Our current organization structure consists of 15-person executive committee with Lucas Johansson and myself as co-chairs, Josh Jancott, and Gigi Nunn as secretary. In addition to the executive committee, our executive sponsor is Nicole LeBoeuf, assistant administrator for the National Ocean Service. Nicole has been an incredible advocate and ally and is our voice with NOAA leadership. Michelle Moore is an EEO diversity specialist with NOAA's Office of Inclusion and Civil Rights. Michelle acts as a special emphasis program manager for NOAA Pride and the LGBTQ+ community at NOAA. NOAA Pride co-chairs are also members of the Diversity and Inclusion Management Advisory Council, or DMAC, a group that brings together chairs of our ERGs. The DMAC works to provide advice, counsel, and program recommendations to NOAA leadership and to coordinate NOAA-wide efforts to advance the integration of the tenets of DEI into the organization policies, procedures, and culture of NOAA. We've been working hard over the past few years. We've developed NOAA Pride resources, become a resource on topics relating to the LGBTQ+ community, advocating for our community, educate the larger NOAA federal workforce about topics relating to the LGBTQ+ community. You can see here are a few of our 2023 priorities. Recently, we've launched the third cohort of the NOAA Pride mentoring program just this past spring. In addition to continuing to offer our straight allies toolkit presentation and pronouns and gender language presentation, we've been working to create a bystander intervention training specific to the LGBTQ+ community. We are hoping to attend and participate in STEM and LGBTQ+ recruitment events. We continue to coordinate and collaborate with other NOAA and Department of Commerce ERGs and DEI groups, as well as other federal ERGs and groups, such as Pride in the Federal Service, which connects groups across the government. We've also working on documenting the name change process at NOAA. This is a collaborative effort with the Women of NOAA ERG and the National Weather Service. Here is just a list of a few events that we have upcoming this month. As you can see, after today at 4 o'clock in Silver Spring, we're going to have an in-person regional happy hour. And the official NOAA ICR Pride Month observance is occurring on June 21st. There's a Malo Bay Potomac River National Marine Sanctuary Potomac Pride paddle on the 24th, and we'll have an additional virtual Pride happy hour on June 27th. As now I would like to introduce our moderator for today's event. As I mentioned earlier, Nicole LeBoeuf is the Assistant Administrator for NOAA's National Ocean Service and the NOAA Pride Executive Sponsor. Nicole oversees all strategic and operational aspects for NOS and provides the strategic vision needed to lead the implementation and activities that support NOS's priorities of safe and efficient transportation and commerce, preparedness and risk reduction, and stewardess, tourism, and recreation. She has over 20 years of scientific and program management experience with emphasis on the connections between science and policy, and previously served as the NOS Deputy Assistant Administrator. Prior to joining NOS, Ms. LeBoeuf served as Acting Deputy Director of the Office of Protected Resources and NOAA Fisheries Chief of the Marine Mammal and Sea Turtle Conservation Division in the Office of Protected Resources, and held positions in various other NOAA offices. She is a strong ally for the LGBTQI+ community and has acted as NOAA's Pride voice with leadership. A big thank you to Nicole, and now I hand it to you.
Thank you, Josh. Hello and welcome to Pride in Leadership, a panel of current and former NOAA leaders sponsored by NOAA Pride and the NOAA Central Library. I'm Nicole LeBoeuf, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am proud to serve as executive sponsor for NOAA Pride and to be an ally for the LGBTQ+ community. LGBTQ Pride is celebrated annually in June to commemorate the June 1969 riots at the Stonewall Inn, a watershed event that transformed the fight for LGBTQ+ equality in the United States. This month-long designation highlights and recognizes LGBTQ+ history and culture and the contributions of LGBTQ+ individuals and educates others on LGBTQ+ topics. Importantly, NOAA's recognition of this important topic stands shoulder to shoulder with LGBTQ+ allies from the White House and other federal agencies, including at the highest levels of government. On May 31st, 2023, President Biden released a proclamation on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex Pride Month, rejecting intolerance, discrimination, and injustice faced by many in the LGBTQ+ community. I urge you to read the President's proclamation in its entirety. And since we celebrated Pride Month in 2022, we have seen historic government-wide progress to advance LGBTQ+ rights, including within the Department of Commerce. On June 1st, Secretary Gina Raimondo raised the LGBTQ+ Pride Progress flag in a ceremony at the Department of Commerce's Herbert C. Hoover building in downtown Washington, D.C. And now, offices across NOAA and around the country are flying the flag this month based on new Department of Commerce guidance. NOAA Pride actively engaged with the department in the development of the DOC flag guidance and on many other efforts over the last year. This year's Department of Commerce LGBTQ+ Pride Month theme, A Spectrum of Color, honors the history, struggles, and achievements of those who have fought and continue to fight for LGBTQ+ inclusion, belonging, and equality. As you heard from Josh, NOAA Pride is a trusted resource for employees and the agency as a whole on topics related to LGBTQ+ community. Since January of 2021, NOAA Pride has reached over 5,000 individuals through more than 50 presentations on pronouns and gendered language, their Straight Allies Toolkit, introductions to the ERG itself, and other events. NOAA Pride now provides access for employees and affiliates across the Department of Commerce to the Straight Allies Toolkit and the LGBTQ+ Cultural Competency, Pronouns, and Gendered Language training on the Commerce Learning Center website. I encourage you to join NOAA Pride later this month for a presentation on pronouns and gendered language, or for the June 27 virtual social happy hour to cap off Pride Month. NOAA, through NOAA Pride, is demonstrating leadership in honoring and improving the lives of NOAA employees, and I sincerely appreciate everyone who is with us today in support or just to learn more. At this time, I would like to introduce the panelists, and what an amazing One NOAA panel we have today. First, Dr. Kevin Werner. In May 2017, Kevin Werner began his role as Science and Research Director at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center. Kevin has extensive experience working to connect science to application in water resources and climate in the Western United States, as well as policy and organizational development. When he worked for the National Weather Service, he led the creation of its Office for Organizational Excellence, bringing strategic thinking and positive change to the entire organization. Next, Vanessa Griffin. Vanessa is a retired NOAA senior executive with over 40 years of experience leading large government IT programs and projects. Vanessa's career focused on planning, developing, and implementing and operating technology that enables the advancement of understanding and applications of weather and climate services for the nation. While working for NOAA, Vanessa led the development of critical ground systems used to operate the GOES-R satellites, directed operations of the nation's weather satellites and satellite data processing systems, and oversaw the development of a strategic plan for the next generation of weather satellites. Then we have Ken Graham. Ken is the director of NOAA's National Weather Service. Ken is responsible for the overall leadership of the Weather Service and for ensuring the day-to-day civilian weather operations for the United States, its territories, adjacent waters, and ocean areas. Ken worked his way up through the ranks at the Weather Service, starting as an intern meteorologist and more recently serving as the director of the National Hurricane Center. Dr. John Cortinas became the 5th permanent director at NOAA's Atlantic Oceanographic Meteorological Laboratory, or AOML, in 2019. In his role, John leads NOAA's preeminent laboratory that focuses on studying the weather, ocean, and ecosystems in the Atlantic Ocean region to improve NOAA's overall products and services for the nation. Before that, John served 9 years as the director of NOAA's Weather Program Office and directed NOAA's Research Cooperative Institutes program prior to that. And last, but seriously and certainly not least, Dr. Kandis Boyd. Dr. Boyd is a former NOAA employee who served as acting director of the NOAA Research's Weather Program Office and who is a current council member of the American Meteorological Society. Kandis is a trailblazer, an advocate, and a renowned expert in STEAM with nearly 30 years of experience leading, teaching, advising, and mentoring students and early career enthusiasts in environmental and atmospheric science. She was the first African-American female to receive an undergraduate degree in meteorology from Iowa State University. She holds a double master's degree in meteorology and water resources, and she holds a doctorate in public administration with a specific concentration in interorganizational leadership and cultural values from Nova Southeastern University. Thank you all again for joining us today to listen to this amazing, diverse, and impressive panel. So let's hear from them. First, I'd like to ask each panelist to provide their pronouns and their connection to the LGBTQ+ community. I'd love to hear a bit about what each of your journeys have been to get where you are today. And some of what I hope you'll cover is whether your relationship and connection to the LGBTQ+ community impacts your leadership style, your priorities, whether there were role models or lack thereof in your journey, how you view yourself as impacting future LGBTQ leaders at NOAA, what advice you would give to someone early in their journey, and whether you see differences in inclusion and belonging of the LGBTQ community in the workplace from maybe past times. And if we've covered all of that and there's still time, we'll take questions from the audience. With that, Kandis, let's hear from you first and then turn it to John. Kandis.
Sure. Well, first, good afternoon, and thank you so much for this awesome opportunity. I worked in NOAA in 3 different line offices and NOAA headquarters for a total of 26 years. So it's definitely a reunion because I'm seeing so many familiar faces today, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for my NOAA family. So first and foremost, thank you for the awesome opportunity. So we're here to talk about LGBTQ+. And for me, it's bittersweet because this is 25 years since I received my double master's degree from Iowa State University in meteorology and water resources. So way back then, it was a great time, but it was also a scary time. It was a great time because any of you who have received an undergraduate, graduate, or even doctoral degree, you know that that is just such an amazing moment to know that you've actually done it and you've received your degree. But also being in Central Iowa as a queer Black woman, there weren't a lot of role models. In fact, I don't know if there was a role model that I could look up to, someone who looked like me. And so for the majority of my career, there were a lot of aspects of my true authentic self that I kept hidden. I learned how to code switch. I learned how to fit in where I could get in. And I really felt that I would at some point in time, show the world who I truly was once I got to a certain level or a certain spot. So, you know, I don't know if that was necessarily the right strategic decision to make at the time, but that's what worked for me. But if you look historically at the LGBTQ plus movement, as Nicole mentioned, Stonewall, the 1-year anniversary of Stonewall, there were several Black LGBTQ women who were instrumental in moving the needle forward and helping the LGBTQ plus community progress. And so if I didn't have role models in my immediate circle, it definitely shows historically that we wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for several people who looked like me, who decided to become a part of the movement. So there's much more to say, but I'm going to pause there because as you can see, we have a lot of panelists and I want to make sure that we hear from all of them. So I'll turn it back over to John for the next part.
John, please.
Thank you, Kandis. Again, my name is John Cortinas. I'm currently the director of the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory down in Miami, Florida. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And my connection with the community is that I'm a gay Latino male. And I can say I have a lot of the same experiences as Kandis did, kind of being a double minority in a culture that is very focused on being macho, if you will. And so being young, you kind of learn to adapt. The code sharing, the code speak that Kandis talks about is learning to fit in, if you will, in a dominant culture and learning how to succeed and learning how to survive, frankly. And again, I didn't have a lot of role models myself, and so I relied very much on my close group of friends, community, colleagues that you would let in close that kind of knew your quote secret. And it was that kind of a support group that was extremely valuable. And I even think today it's that kind of extended family that has helped me deal with challenges that I've had throughout my career. I believe, though, that a lot of those experiences I had in learning to survive, if you will, to be tenacious, to be goal-oriented, resulted in where I am today, and the qualities of a leader that I think I possess in that I drew from when I was learning to survive and succeed. So I'd also say that, again, while growing up there was a lack of mentors and others, I feel today we've got so many more opportunities for people coming up now that there are, as Josh pointed out, Pride has a mentor program. I participated in that so that we make it really easier, I should say, for people to have a support group. I can't imagine working for any other federal agency than NOAA. I've gotten so much support coming up through my career in NOAA. That's my own experience. Not everyone may have the same experience, but I've been very fortunate to have leaders, directors that have helped me to succeed and move up the ladder in NOAA, knowing that I was a gay male, but that showing that that was insignificant, but that looking to me as a person and helping to develop my skill set was what was most important. And I can't state how important that is for anyone as you develop yourself, to not have to have that additional stress, not to have to worry about you being discovered and then someone deciding, oh, well, then I don't want to support you now that I know something else about you. Having that openness from a leadership perspective is extremely important. And so I take that as a leader myself and try to create an environment for the organizations that I lead so that people understand that they should feel welcome, that they should feel that they have a lot to contribute regardless of their background, regardless of who they are. And so I think I take those lessons with me and hope that I can develop communities for those and those organizations that I lead where others will feel very welcome, because then I think that allows people to grow and really to help organizations advance by recognizing the best that everyone has to offer in a way where they don't feel like they're stifled or afraid to show and contribute in that way. So with that, I'll turn it back to Nicole.
John, thank you so much for that. Let's hear from Vanessa and Ken. Vanessa, you're on mute. No, not yet.
Okay, now you go.
There we go.
Yeah. All right, so I'm Vanessa Griffin. I guess I'm a little different than the rest of the panelists that I no longer work for NOAA. I'm now a NOAA supporter and graduate of NOAA. I retired about a year ago, and let me tell you, retirement is wonderful. Matter of fact, I'm talking to you from the beach in the Outer Banks on vacation with my wife Natalie. And the internet's pretty poor, so hopefully it'll last while I'm here. But it's been wonderful to hear what Kandis and John were talking about, and I'm sure a lot of our stories are very similar. I wanted to talk more about my professional story, and I've shared this before with I think Pride in the past. I spent 10 years in the Air Force, and this was in the late 70s, 80s, even before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I was actually assumed that I was going to continue in the Air Force and probably be a general and just really have a great career. And then I got caught up in witch hunts in San Antonio that were going on at the time. And so it was at that point in time I made the decision that I needed to leave the Air Force because they were going to, force me to leave regardless, most likely, because my secret was getting out. And that was, but that was a long time ago. That was back in the late 80s. And certainly things are very different now. But I will say that when I left the Air Force and I started projecting what I was going to do with my career, what I said right then, and I've said ever since then, is I'm never, ever going to be anywhere where I can't be my authentic self, where I can't be honest about who I am, where I can't be out, where I can't have everybody understand that, Natalie is my wife and we have a wonderful relationship. And I've been very successful, probably because I joined the U.S. government, which is a great place to work, even back then. Early on, though, it wasn't easy. There were places where I worked down in Alabama with NASA, where there were a lot of people who didn't like the fact that I was a lesbian, didn't like the fact that I would bring my spouse to office parties and things, and perhaps even worked against me a little bit in the background. But about 1995, I came up to DC and took a job at NASA headquarters. And let me tell you, the first day I got here, it was literally like walking out of the house into Oz. It was like going from a dark and gray place to a very colorful rainbow place, and everybody was very supportive. And that's been my experience ever since, that everybody that I worked with, all of my management and all my leadership change, both at NASA and then later at NOAA, when I joined NOAA in 2006, everybody's been so supportive and so accepting. And I've never really had any concern or issue at all about, from anybody about who I was. I was allowed to be who I was, and I was allowed just to focus on my career and do the wonderful things I was able to do and meet the wonderful people and work with them, several of which are in the panel today. It's great to see a bunch of faces that I worked with over the years. But I will say that it's been because I think NOAA, NASA, and then of course NOAA was always a very supportive place. And the NOAA leadership, the NOAA, right up to the top, was always very supportive of LGBTQ plus issues, as well as just myself in general. I know one of the things you asked was, did I think being, my experience somehow helped me to be a better leader? And I think it absolutely does, and absolutely did. Because, knowing that you're different and from other people in a lot of ways, your peers, you certainly respect that they're different in other ways as well. And so diversity and celebration of diversity and focusing on that is something that I've always done, and it's been an integral part of me inherently in my leadership style. I mean, I can't answer whether I've been that person that I wanted to be, whether I've been that role model for others. I hope I have. I hope over my 40-year career, I've been a great role model. I don't think I had any role models necessarily growing up, but I had really good leaders who supported me every step of the way. So I don't think I knew anybody who was an LGBTQ person in the leadership chain coming up, but I certainly felt they certainly supported me, and I had no issues at all. So, I still think it's a great time. It's a great time to work for NOAA. I think NOAA is a very positive place to work. I know there's a lot going on in our country now that is starting to be frightening as we sort of maybe are going back and retrenched in a lot of ways. about some of the issues that we are so strongly supportive of and dependent on. But for the next generation of people coming, I would just say continue just to be yourself and just allow yourself to be yourself and don't worry about it. Don't let fear or anything else ever get in your way, because it's a great place to work and it's a great country to live in, and the people are there and they'll help you. And maybe not everybody in NOAA, across all of NOAA, I don't know, but it's certainly in the DC area. It was a great place to live and work.
Vanessa, thank you so much for telling that story and for telling us more about your leadership journey in this community. Okay, Ken, and then Kevin.
Wow, Nicole, it's amazing. And just hearing Vanessa and John and Kandis, I mean, it's just interesting to hear all the stories and everybody sharing here. This is amazing. So good to see everybody. And so, Kevin, I won't have it after you. So, hi, good to see you too. But so I think, I was thinking about this and just listening to the stories. Listen to what we just heard. I mean, how proud does it feel to sit here? I just did an all hands here in Birmingham, Alabama at the WFO, traveling down here, and to hear you all say it's a good place to be, and NOAA, it's a safe place to be. That is like incredible. I mean, I'm sure there's definitely still some challenges. So me as a, he, him, his, and just being in a situation that being in charge of the New Orleans office, then working in Miami for 4 years, I am so proud to be really just such an ally, a supporter from these leadership positions, and working with so many in the community and having the conversations. And that's one thing that I really wanted to stress on this. We did a video yesterday for Pride, and it was just absolutely just real talk. We sat around the table and we had a conversation about the community and what it's like to be in NOAA, in this case, the National Weather Service. So one thing that came out of that is that if you're not in the community and you're curious, ask. It was just an incredible thing that came out of this conversation, and it's like, have the conversations, talk about it, and I thought that was really amazing that came out of the conversation yesterday. And I think just being an ally in the community, just really proud of that and being able to support that from a leadership perspective. But not only that, just sharing the story of, I watched how difficult it was for my daughter to come out. Right, she didn't talk about it, and I look back and I just wonder if she didn't know if she would have parental support or what that situation is going to be. And it was a day that her partner came over and they were going to tell me, and they just struggled. They sat there at the table out on the patio. It's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I knew what they were doing. I let them go too long. I should have let them off the hook. Anyway, I let them go a little too long. And finally, I said, I'm going to interrupt this conversation. If you all asking me if it's okay if you all date? And they're like, oh. And I was like, absolutely. And all three of us were in tears and big hugs. Absolutely, I support that. But I watched her, how hard it was to be able to be open. And I think about, that's just dad, right? And I think about the workplace or society or your family, and it's not easy. So I just watched that and just really proud to be just a 100% supporter and ally, and just appreciate this opportunity, Nicole, to be able to share these stories and be a big part of this. And let me tell you, my role model, since we're going to do all the questions, look, I was thinking about the role model, like who would be the role model? You know who the role model is? It's absolutely those coworkers in New Orleans, those coworkers in Miami, those coworkers where that we all talked about things. We had the conversations and supported each other no matter what. Those were the role models. Just some amazing people within NOAA that I've met along the way, and just proud to say that we've been able to be family all along in my 29-year career. So that's it. So it's amazing. Good to be a part of this group, Nicole.
Awesome, Ken. Thank you so much for that. All right, Kevin, bring us home.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks for all those kind words from everybody else. It's really powerful to be on this panel. I wanted to start out with a quick shout out. I'm in San Diego, California with the NOAA West and NOAA Central Regional Collaboration teams. I think they're watching downstairs, so just a quick shout out to them and what they do. And I also want to give a shout out to NOAA Pride and to you, Nicole, for coordinating, moderating this. This is a really important and I think a really poignant thing to do, and I think it's really important for the agency and for the government. So listening to the other speakers and sort of thinking about what I wanted to say yesterday, one observation I have that I can't say this loudly enough, and I can't say it enough, is that my generation, Generation X, is really the first generation to have the opportunity to be out in the federal workforce. My pronouns are he, him. I'm an out gay man. But when I came to work for NOAA, and I'll give a little bit of history on this, I was not out, and you know, I had some difficulties with the process of coming out that I wanted to talk about. But before I do that, I appreciate Nicole sort of giving the recent history and the really good things that have been happening at the federal level in our workplace. But the longer history is pretty dark. And I think it's worth touching on that. Vanessa obviously touched on it with her own experience, but going back to the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, there was a multitude of prohibitions against gay people, LGBTQ people serving openly and out in the federal government across the board, right? This is part of the so-called lavender scare that existed back then as part of the Red Scare. And I think it's important for us to understand that history, right? I've done a lot of reading about role models, and reading about this history. Frank Kandis is a name that comes up pretty frequently. He was a PhD astrophysicist and one-time civil servant who was kicked out of the government, the precursor to NASA, for being gay. And then he spent the next 20 or 30 years of his life, largely unsuccessfully organizing to change those policies that had kicked him out of the federal civil service. And of course, in the 1980s, things got even worse with the AIDS epidemic, especially for gay men and the just devastation that occurred across the community, not just in government, but across the whole world, really. And then Vanessa mentioned Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That passed in 1993. It wasn't really until, I would say, 1998 when President Clinton signed an executive order 13087 that prohibited discrimination based on sexual orientation across most of the federal government. That was really, I think, the starting of the turning of the tide, right? And so segueing to me, so that was 1998. I came to NOAA in 1999, 1 year later, right? And I came in as a NOAA Corps officer. As I said, I was not out at the time, and it wasn't clear to me whether the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy extended to the NOAA Corps. And I was pretty intent on getting out of my hometown, Seattle, where I live now. But I wanted to use the NOAA Corps to get out of Seattle and see the world and also come out. And so I took advantage of the employee assistance program that NOAA offered at the time to get counseling services around coming out. And those were really successful and really helpful for me personally, until the leadership in the NOAA Corps, I don't even know how, discovered that I was using this program, and they wanted to see the records. They wanted to know what I was talking about. And that was really frightening and really terrifying for my career and for where I was going. And I went into those counseling sessions as anybody would, thinking that those were confidential and not something that's going to be shared with your employer. So I ended up leaving the NOAA Corps because of this, because I didn't want to continue to serve in a role that was sort of questionable in terms of the legitimacy of my service and coming out. And I went to work for the Weather Service. And since then, I will say, I've had a lot of support, as other panelists have talked about, but it's not been entirely blue skies and rainbows and unicorns. There's been challenges and bumps along the way. That one that I just shared was one of the more significant, but there have been others as well. I think maybe just one more thing to share. I can't really repeat this loudly enough. I feel like it's sort of my responsibility as an out gay man in a leadership position, as part of this first generation, to set an example and to share my experiences, even though it's not necessarily easy and not necessarily part of something I would do on my own normally. But I think it's important for people listening here and elsewhere to know that there is a history here, and it hasn't always been easy. And we're trying to lay the foundation, I think, for a better tomorrow in the way that the other panelists have talked about. And I want to be part of that, and I want to use my own experience and my own service to make that better tomorrow more likely and even better. So that's I think where I want to stop. Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was wonderful. I'm going to give an early warning to the audience members that you can provide questions to the panelists in the chat. We hope that you will. I'm going to get to one question that I don't think we answered to provide some time for folks to get some good questions in the chat box. And this has to do with any reflections or advice, maybe that's a strong word, but anything you would say to your NOAA colleagues that are earlier in their journey, either as a member of the LGBTQ plus community or as an ally or someone really just trying to learn the topic for themselves so they can better understand their colleagues. Any thoughts for them, someone early in the process? Someone who may be joining in today for the first time and thinking, I'm just going to check it out, or gosh, I wish I could come out, but first let me hear what NOAA Pride's up to. Somebody early in that journey at NOAA. Anyone want to take that?
I can start.
Thank you.
I can start. So I mentioned it earlier that I spent a lot of my career not being my true authentic self, and I can't tell you how much time and energy that takes away from you actually doing your job. So from a business perspective, we want people to be the most productive as possible, but also from a mental perspective, we want people to be their true authentic self. People in the LGBTQ plus community have higher rates of depression, have higher rates of suicide. And so for that reason, my advice to anybody would be what we've been saying in many different forms, and that is come to your position, to your job, to your place of work as your true authentic self, and that you belong, you are wanted, and we are trying to create an inclusive society so that everyone can be their true authentic self. So that would be my advice, is to be yourself, don't hide, and to be the best person that you can be.
Nicole, could I add on to that real quick? Is, it's just interesting. I've been my first year in this job, I've been doing a lot of traveling at the offices, and people come up and they talk, and they express some feelings, and it also came up yesterday in the video that we did as well. And I think my biggest piece of advice is to fully realize you're not alone. You got to talk, and I think it's been really on my mind since I got the job, talking to people, and people have come up on the side and said, I just don't know who to talk to. I just feel alone. I feel isolated, and and not everybody's in a large city community like a Miami or a New Orleans or a like a New York or something like that. You got people in Kansas. You got people in other places that feel like they're more alone, and they don't know where to turn, both community-wise and at the workplace. So the biggest thing is just please, you're not alone. We've got to really ensure everybody fully understands that they're not alone, and there's resources, there's people you can talk to, look at the people in the panel. There's all sorts of great folks across NOAA that you need to talk to. So I encourage you to talk to somebody. You're not alone. And I think that's the big thing that we got. Kandis, you mentioned about the higher rates of depression, and that, right? And what happens is if you don't know where to turn and talk to people, that could really compound those issues. So please, you're not alone. The biggest thing is talk. Please talk.
Yeah, I think you and Kandis both have said it very well. It's even in this day and age, I know it's still frightening for people to come out. I mean, it's just, it's a hard thing to do, to come out to your family, come out to your friends. But I think just maybe have some trust. Have some trust that the people around you really are going to be supportive, and don't hesitate to, be your honest and true self. And also speaking to the people who aren't, LGBTQI, but we're very supportive. You need to be very supportive as well. You need to be welcoming and willing to talk about issues and diversity in a way that makes others comfortable, so they can come out and they can feel supportive and not as frightened, perhaps early in their careers, to admit that, this is something that might have an impact on their career. I can assure you it didn't have an impact on mine after I left the military, but every case is different, so be supportive of each other.
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa. And I want to foot stomp Kandis's point about how much time and energy it takes to be conflicted and to be secretive and to feel like you can't express yourself safely. We're all here to do very important jobs, and it takes bandwidth and energy away from those jobs when we are thinking to ourselves all the time, you know, do other people know? Can they tell? Why are they not listening to me? And that's normal human response to those things. But, you know, anyone who is spending time away from the NOAA mission, worried about those things, you know, I would encourage you to talk to those of us who can provide safe space, because it is exhausting, and it's and there are safe spaces to have those conversations. I think a lot about how much bandwidth it takes to feel excluded, right? How much bandwidth it takes to feel prejudice, and I would want to just take all that away and clear for the oceanography and the meteorology and the modeling, and make everyone feel as safe to be the expert that they actually are.
Nicole, I'd like to also add that while we have great resources within NOAA, kind of from a general perspective, like Pride ERG, and Kevin mentioned the other services that are available to any employee in terms of something you might want to talk to about issues. I really relied, when I was a student and graduating, within my own scientific organizations and disciplines. Each one has really kind of fully more developed their diversity components. And so I, you know, early on developed kind of a network of other gay men and women that were meteorologists. And we would gather in social settings when we went to like an annual meeting of the AMS. We would all get together, and those were extremely helpful in terms of being able to identify maybe specific issues that were just kind of in the meteorological community kind of thing, where we kind of, where the community is small enough so you kind of know the various work environments. And so that really provided a lot of support, and it also provided a network for me when I was looking for a job to find places that I knew others felt comfortable or safe in, and that they could kind of also tell you, oh, that's a place to, you know, that would be a good place for you might, for gay, you know, they're very supportive of gay folks, or I know that, things like that. So, you know, also you might look in your own scientific disciplines or your own whatever IT disciplines or things like that in your organizations to get people that are in your field as well, to really provide kind of a networking community. Was really helpful for me as I was coming up.
All right, thank you, John. Anything else? Words of wisdom? All right, let's see what we've got coming in from the chat. Okay, I'm gonna ask Katie Poser, one of our organizers here from the NOAA Central Library. Katie, do we have any questions for the panelists?
We do. So this was touched on lightly, so I think we can kind of revisit this a little fully. Our first audience question is, what is your best advice for a young queer person just starting their career?
I guess I can jump in on that. I would say a couple of things. One is a lot of the advice that I would give would be the same advice I would give to anybody just starting their career. And you know, I think a lot of us, probably all of us, have done this in terms of like thinking about what worked for us, what didn't work for us. You know, advice in that genre for me would be, you know, getting clear with yourself on what your long-term goals are in terms of your attributes of what you're looking for. Anybody that I've ever mentored can talk to you about the device I use there, and I'm happy to talk offline with folks about that. Understanding how the process works, like understanding how the HR system and the process works. But then specifically for the queer people, I would say, as John, I think he articulated it very well. I was going to make the same point as John. There's a community out there. There are communities, plural, out there, and you know, I think plugging into those communities that resonate with you has been incredibly helpful for me over the course of my career. And it sounded like, you know, very similar to John and probably others. I think that's probably true for everybody, but it's probably especially true for queer people. So that would be my advice.
Thanks, Kim. All right, we have another question, I believe, in the chat. Katie?
Yep. Our next question is, also directed at Kevin. Can you speak more about your experience with EAP? It's frequently advertised as being available, but I've never spoken with anyone who has used it before to know what that experience was like.
Great question.
Sure, absolutely. I can't talk anymore. The EAP program has, I think, changed quite a lot over the years. When I used it, in the anecdote I described at the beginning, it was a much richer program. It paid for therapy sessions up to a certain number of them. I want to say it was like 6 or 8. And you could also go get legal advice or financial advice. I think you can still do that, but I think it's much more narrow in terms of the providers that you can access and the sort of scope of what you can access with them. So yeah, when I already shared my story, but when I was on a NOAA ship, I was actually here in San Diego. I went and saw a therapist here, and it was fully paid for. As I said, the agency did come after the records for that. I don't think that's normal. I haven't talked to anybody else that's had that experience, fortunately. So I think therapy sessions and every other instance I've talked to people that have used it that have shared with me, they have kept confidentiality, which I think is incredibly important if you're going to do therapy. And I highly recommend therapy for just about everybody. So anyway, there's a website, I'm quite sure, that goes into more detail on the current NOAA Employee Assistance Program. But it's something that I would absolutely encourage people to take advantage of. It is a benefit that we have as NOAA employees.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Katie. I'm going to try and expand that question and see if there's panelists that could recommend resources, either NOAA Pride resources or HR resources or others that you've used within NOAA to good effect, that you could point folks to understand more or to understand their rights and that kind of thing. We did recently help support the development of a flag guidance from the Department of Commerce, which is great. But are there any other resources or key documents that anyone on the panel might say, yeah, you should check that out? Or should we just point folks to the NOAA Pride website?
Yeah, I don't know about resources, but I will say, if you're just coming into NOAA or you're thinking, trying to have a career, don't discount the mentoring program. I think the mentoring program is so vital, and I think it's been very successful at NOAA. I've mentored many people over my career, and I think all of us have. But don't hesitate to sign up to not only maybe be a mentee, but also even be a mentor. If you're in mid-career kind of place. I think that's where a lot of support really can come from.
And Vanessa, are you speaking about the NOAA mentoring program or the NOAA Pride mentoring program, or either one?
Well, I've never done the NOAA Pride mentoring, but I've been very involved in the NOAA mentoring in general. But a lot of the same issues still come up. You really want someone to listen to you, someone to help you, plot your way through things that may be, of concern to you, and a chance to hear what other people have to say, have to think, and how they've handled similar problems in their career. So.
Excellent. And I see that Katie has linked in the chat for all audience members the NOAA EAP website. Thank you, Katie, for that.
Yes, and we do have a question about the mentoring. Is there a queer to queer mentoring program at NOAA via the NOAA Pride or others?
There is a more recently established NOAA Pride-based mentoring program. I would ask maybe Josh or Lucas to come on and tell us a little bit more about that. It's relatively new.
Sure. So as I mentioned in the beginning in the introduction, we're in our 3rd cohort of the NOAA Pride mentoring program, which is a subset of the overall NOAA program. It's also open to contractors, unlike the NOAA mentoring program. And it's for the LGBTQ plus community and allies. So sometimes we will have an ally serve as a mentor, but also many times we try to match based on preferences of the mentee and mentor. So it's been very successful, and this is our 3rd year doing it.
That's amazing.
Thanks, Josh. We have another question, particularly for John and Kandis. As members of the LGBTQI plus community and also persons of color, some in the same position may feel like they have to pick a struggle when tackling diversity issues. Have you ever felt that to be a double challenge, championing movements as a person of color as well as the LGBTQ plus community?
So I check a lot of boxes. I'm a queer Black woman. I'm over the age of 40. I'm a single mother of 2. I mean, you know, it's sometimes hard to compartmentalize. Is that a nice way of saying it? So when I come to any conversation, I'm coming as Kandis. So I don't think that there's one category or one aspect of my being that's more important than another. I will say that we have awareness months, and of course, during different awareness months, I might be asked to come and speak on a specific aspect of my personality. But I don't feel that I need to shun any part of myself. I'm proud of who I am, all aspects of who I am, and I bring that to the table in all of the presentations and panels that I am a part of. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I mean, we're whole people, and you know, I think there is perhaps an element of code speak, though, that depends on the community where you are at the moment. And I also think that there are elements of or aspects of us that, let's say, if we're primarily, my example, we're in a maybe a more predominant Latino kind of event or organization, etc. I do feel a bit of responsibility to ensure that I'm representing the gay side of me as well, to ensure that that community is also accepting of the other aspects of me, so that they'll accept me as a, you know, that they understand that whole, you know, people, there are different aspects to everyone, you know, and vice versa. Within the gay community, there is racism, there is prejudice, there is all of that that goes on in the gay community as well. So you really kind of have a responsibility to make sure, just generally speaking, just regardless of whatever community you come from, that there is overall acceptance and that there's an understanding and that everybody feels welcome to the extent possible.
That's great, John. Kandis, thank you so much for that. Coming as a whole person, I really like the way you both put that. I may start saying I come as Kandis, right? Because that's checking a lot of boxes, and it's saying it's the holistic, it's the totality of who you are. I appreciate that so much. If I could ask for either John or Kandis, folks who have used the phrase code speak, could you explain that for the audience, what that means to you?
I've been going first a lot, so John, I'll let you go first this time.
It's essentially a way that you learn to communicate within particular communities. So there may be various words that a community might use when they're communicating with one another. There may be a body language that is adopted more widely in particular communities. And so you just kind of, it's just part of a communication mechanism that in order to communicate effectively with others within a particular community, you may adopt and use certain words that you wouldn't use in other communities. And that's pretty much as a way of communicating, but in a way that other communities may feel more comfortable, where they can relate to you, where there's kind of a group, more of a group interaction.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just piggyback on what John said. For a large part of my career, there was work Kandis and there was home Kandis. Because at home, I really felt that I was my true authentic self. My family and friends knew the totality of Kandis. But at work, there were some aspects that I did not share. I mean, I didn't share with a lot of people that I was a single mother of 2, because I had been in spaces and places where people had discriminated against mothers and would prevent them from participating in activities simply because they were a mother and they thought that they should focus their time elsewhere. And yes, I have been complicit, and I have been in spaces and places where people have talked about LGBTQ plus individuals because they did not know who I truly was. And so as a result, going back to the code speak or the code switching, it's that you learn to be a certain person, to fit in, to be amongst the masses, or to not stand out so that people don't see all aspects of yourself. Because at least for me, I thought that was the way for me to excel in the workplace, is to not let people know every aspect of me. I mean, I walk in the room and you can see that I am female, you can see that I am African American, and I've already experienced a lot of the isms that go along with that. So for a lot of my career, I said, why would I introduce other aspects of myself that people can use to discriminate against me? Now, again, it's been nearly 30 years. I have a different perspective now, but that was my mindset. And that's where code speak and code switching comes from. It's, I am going to be the person who I think they want me to be in order for me to fit in.
Gosh, thank you, Kandis. And don't we all do that from time to time? Isn't that amazing? Okay, we are close to time. I would like to offer the floor back to Josh to close us out and to reflect on anything that he would like to. Thank you all to the panelists. This was amazing. Josh, please.
Thank you, Nicole, our executive sponsor, for your commitment to our cause. Vanessa, Kandis, Ken, John, and Kevin for providing your personal experiences and for being visible. Thank you to NOAA Central Library and NOAA Pride for sponsoring this panel on Pride in Leadership. As you can see, everyone's journey in leadership and pride is quite unique. We hope everyone learned quite a bit from this discussion and hope everyone enjoys the rest of Pride Month. Happy Pride. And just one more item, to contact NOAA Pride, you can see our email address as Lucas and myself. You can reach the executive committee at NOAA Pride, xcom@noaa.gov. And we have posted in the chat, but also our Google site is available at that link listed on this slide. Thank you, everyone.
One last question. I see everybody waving goodbye, but where can we get that pride flag that is behind Ken with the NOAA logo?
Yes. Ken, where'd you get it?
Weather Service comms. We used it in our video yesterday when we did the Pride video, the panel discussion. We had it in the background, so comms has it. We can get it to everybody, right? We can, yeah, we'll get it to everybody. I love it.
Awesome.
Huh? Look at that.
Thank you all. Thank you all for listening. We did record this today, so if you do want to revisit, please find this on the library's YouTube channel. If we didn't answer your question, we will get back to you individually offline. Have a safe and wonderful day.
Thank you, NOAA Library.
All right, thank you, everybody.